The rain fell hard against the large windows of Los Angeles International Airport. Lightning flashed across the dark evening sky. Keanu Reeves stood in line at gate B-17, ticket in hand. He wore a simple black jacket, jeans, and had his long hair tucked under a worn baseball cap. Few people noticed the famous actor as he waited to board his flight to New York. Keanu was tired. He had just finished filming his latest movie, working 16-hour days for the past 3 weeks. All he wanted now was to sit in his comfortable first-class seat, maybe read a book, and get some sleep during the 5-hour flight. Now boarding. Flight 278 to New York. First-class passengers, announced a voice over the speakers. Keanu showed his ticket to the smiling gate agent and walked down the long boarding bridge. As he stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant, Judy Miller, greeted him warmly. "Good evening, Mr. Reeves. Your seat is 2A by the window." Keanu nodded with a small smile and made his way to his seat. The first-class cabin was quiet and spacious. He placed his small bag in the overhead bin and settled into the wide leather seat. From his pocket, he pulled out a worn paperback book and placed it on his lap. Just as he was about to put on his headphones, Keanu heard a commotion at the front of the cabin. He looked up to see Clint Eastwood, the legendary 94-year-old actor and director, standing in the aisle. The older man looked uncomfortable as he spoke with Judy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eastwood," Judy was saying. "First class is completely full tonight. I wish we could do something, but with the storm, this was the only flight available." Keanu watched as Clint Eastwood shifted his weight from one foot to another. The older man looked tired, much more tired than Keanu felt. Without thinking twice, Keanu stood up. "Mr. Eastwood," he called out. "Please take my seat." Both Judy and Clint turned to look at him, surprise on their faces. "That's very kind," said Clint, his voice low and gravelly. "But I couldn't possibly—" "I insist," Keanu said, already gathering his book and bag. "You'll be more comfortable here." "Sir, you don't have to do this," Judy said to Keanu. "It's no problem at all," Keanu replied with his trademark gentle smile. Before either of them could protest further, Keanu had moved past them and headed toward the economy section. Judy quickly checked her list and told him his new seat would be 23B, a middle seat in the back of the plane. As Keanu made his way through the crowded main cabin, a few passengers recognized him, their eyes widening in surprise. He simply nodded, politely, and continued to his new seat. Row 23 was near the back of the plane, just in front of the bathrooms. In seat 23A, pressed against the window, sat Frank Collins, a man in his 40s with thinning hair and round glasses. He was gripping the armrests tightly, his knuckles white. In seat 23C sat Betty White, an elderly woman with curly white hair and bright red lipstick. "Excuse me," Keanu said politely as he squeezed into the middle seat between them. Frank Collins looked up, his eyes growing wide with recognition. You're... "Yes, he is," Betty interrupted with a smile. "And isn't it nice that he's sitting with us regular folks?" Keanu settled into the narrow middle seat, his knees pressing against the seat in front of him. "Just trying to get to New York like everyone else," he said. As the rest of the passengers boarded, the plane became noisy and warm. A child cried a few rows ahead. Someone laughed too loudly several rows behind. The smell of a tuna sandwich drifted through the air. Back in first class, Clint Eastwood had reluctantly taken Keanu's seat. He felt guilty, but his old bones appreciated the extra space. A flight attendant brought him a glass of water and a warm towel. "That was quite something," said the woman in the seat next to him, 2B. "Not many people would give up a first-class seat." Clint nodded. "He's a good man. Always heard that about him." The woman introduced herself as Patricia Johnson. She was a federal judge heading to New York for a high-profile case. She and Clint began chatting about movies and law and how the two sometimes intersected. Meanwhile, in row 23, Keanu learned that Frank Collins was terrified of flying. The man had taken anti-anxiety medication, but it hadn't kicked in yet. Every little bump made him gasp and grab the armrests harder. "First time flying?" Keanu asked kindly. "20th time," Frank admitted. "It never gets easier." On his other side, Betty White was more than happy to talk. She showed Keanu pictures of her grandchildren on her phone. and told him about her recent hip replacement. The doctor said I'd be in pain for months, she said proudly. But I was up and walking in 2 weeks, showed them all. The plane pushed back from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway. Outside, the storm had grown worse. Rain lashed against the windows and the plane shook in the strong wind. "Oh, God," moaned Frank, closing his eyes tightly. "It's just a little weather," Betty said, patting his arm across Keanu. "We'll be above the clouds soon, dear." "The captain's," voice came over the speakers. "Good evening, folks. This is Captain Alan Garcia speaking. We're looking at some rough weather for takeoff, but we should climb above it quickly. Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff." As the plane accelerated down the runway, Frank began breathing rapidly. Without a word, Keanu offered his hand. The frightened man grabbed it and held on tight as the plane lifted off the ground. "Tell me about your work," Keanu said, trying to distract him. "What takes you to New York?" Between deep breaths, Frank explained that he was an accountant. He was traveling to close an important deal that could save his small firm from bankruptcy. "If I don't make this meeting tomorrow afternoon," he said, his voice shaking with each bump of turbulence, 12 people lose their jobs. "You'll make it," Keanu assured him. 3 hours into the flight, the turbulence had not improved. The seatbelt sign had remained on, and the flight attendants stayed strapped in their seats. The plane dropped suddenly, then rose again. "People," gasped. A few screamed. Someone in the back vomited. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Garcia's voice came through the speakers, sounding tense. "Due to worsening conditions, we're going to make an unscheduled landing in Denver. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened." A collective groan went through the cabin. Frank looked both relieved and worried. "Denver? But my meeting, we might still make it to New York in time," Keanu reassured him, though he wasn't sure. In first class, Clint Eastwood and Judge Johnson exchanged concerned looks. The judge checked her watch. "This could be a problem," she murmured. "My case begins at 10 tomorrow morning." 30 minutes later, the plane landed roughly at Denver International Airport. Rain and hail pounded the aircraft as it taxied to the ing. Captain Garcia announced that all passengers needed to deplane and wait in the terminal for further information. As people gathered their belongings and slowly filed out, Keanu noticed a quiet man in the row across from them. The man wore a plain suit and hadn't spoken during the entire flight. He kept checking his watch and looking anxiously at his phone. Something about him made Keanu uneasy. In the terminal, airline staff directed passengers to a waiting area. A representative announced that due to the severe storm system, all flights to the East Coast were grounded until morning. The airline would provide hotel accommodations for the night. Keanu spotted Clint Eastwood sitting alone in a corner of the waiting area. He walked over to check on the older actor. "Mr. Eastwood, are you all right?" Clint looked up and gave a slight smile. "I should be asking you that. You're the one sitting in the sardine can back there." "It wasn't so bad," Keanu said. "How was your flight up until now?" "Interesting. I was sitting next to a federal judge. Smart woman." As they spoke, Judy, the flight attendant, approached them with news about hotel arrangements. Due to a convention in Denver, rooms were limited. Passengers would need to share. What neither of them knew was that this simple act of kindness, giving up a seat on a plane, had set in motion a chain of events that would soon put lives in danger. The quiet man from the plane watched them from across the terminal, speaking softly into his phone. And somewhere in the crowd, another passenger was making plans that would change everything. The Denver airport bustled with stranded passengers from many canceled flights. Keanu Reeves stood in line at the hotel desk with hundreds of others. The airline had arranged rooms at the Airport Palace Hotel, but there weren't enough for everyone to have their own. "We'll need to put 3 people in each room," explained the tired airline worker. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Keanu found himself assigned to room 412 with Frank Collins, the nervous accountant from the plane, and the quiet man who had been watching them in the terminal. The man introduced himself as Scott Weber, saying he was a pharmaceutical sales representative heading to a conference in New York. "I just hope we can get out of here by morning," Frank said, checking his phone again. "My meeting is at 2 tomorrow. If I miss it, my company loses everything." The 3 men walked through the rainy parking lot to the hotel shuttle. The cold, Wind whipped around them. Lightning flashed overhead, followed by a loud crack of thunder that made Frank jump. "Weather report says this storm isn't going anywhere soon," Scott said, looking at his phone. His voice was flat, emotionless. In another shuttle heading to the same hotel were Clint Eastwood and Judge Patricia Johnson. The airline had given them a VIP room to share due to their status. Judge Johnson was on her phone, talking in a low voice about her court case. "Yes, I understand the implications," she said. "This is a sensitive matter. The evidence must be protected at all costs." Clint tried not to listen, but in the small space of the van, it was impossible not to hear. The judge mentioned something about witness protection and a major drug trafficking operation. When she noticed Clint listening, she quickly ended her call. "Sorry about that," she said. "Work never stops, even when planes can't fly." "No need to apologize," Clint replied. "I've played enough judges and cops in movies to know how it goes." The judge smiled. "This case is important. A man named Victor Sanchez is testifying against the head of a major crime family. If we can protect him long enough to testify, we could bring down one of the biggest drug operations on the East Coast." "Sounds dangerous," Clint said. "It is. That's why security is so tight. No one outside my team is supposed to know the details." At the hotel, Keanu, Frank, and Scott checked into their room. It was small, with 2 double beds and a rollaway cot. Keanu offered to take the cot, letting the other 2 men have the beds. "I appreciate that," Frank said. "With my back problems and this stress, I need all the comfort I can get." Scott said little as he placed his small black briefcase on the desk and locked the bathroom door behind him. Keanu and Frank exchanged looks. "Odd guy," Frank whispered. Keanu nodded. There was something about Scott that didn't seem right. His clothes were too perfect, his haircut too precise for a regular sales rep, and he kept checking his watch, as if waiting for something. When Scott came out of the bathroom, he announced he was going to the hotel bar for a drink and left the room. As soon as the door closed, Frank turned to Keanu. "I can't believe I'm sharing a room with Keanu Reeves," he said with a nervous laugh. "My kids are going to freak out when I tell them." Keanu smiled. "Tell me more about this meeting tomorrow. Why is it so important?" Frank explained that his small accounting firm was on the verge of bankruptcy. They needed this new client, a major retail chain, to stay afloat. 12 people depended on his company for their jobs. "I've worked with some of them for 15 years, Frank said, his voice cracking. "They're like family. I can't let them down." Meanwhile, in their room, Clint and Judge Johnson continued their conversation. The judge revealed more details about her case, not realizing the danger of sharing such information. "Victor Sanchez was the personal accountant for the Martinez family," she explained. "He kept records of everything: drug shipments, money laundering, bribes to officials. When the FBI flipped him, he brought everything with him. The trial starts tomorrow and I need to be there." "Sounds like something from one of my movies," Clint said. "Except this is real. People have already died trying to silence Sanchez." Down in the hotel bar, Scott Weber sat alone in a corner nursing a whiskey. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "It's me," he said quietly. "The flight was diverted to Denver." "Yes, everyone from the flight is here at the airport palace." "Hotel? No, I haven't identified the package carrier yet, but I'm working on it." "Yes, I'll report back when I have more information." Scott hung up and noticed a woman sitting 2 tables away watching him. She quickly looked down at her drink when their eyes met. He recognized her from the first-class section of the plane. She had been sitting near where Keanu's original seat was before he gave it to Clint Eastwood. Back in room 412, Keanu decided to take a shower. While Frank was watching TV, Keanu went into the bathroom. The hot water felt good after the stressful flight. When he came out in a t-shirt and sweatpants, Scott had returned to the room. Scott was on his phone again, speaking in a low voice by the window. When he saw Keanu, he quickly ended his call. "Just checking in with the office," he explained. Keanu nodded, but something felt off. He lay down on the cot, pretending to rest while watching Scott through half-closed eyes. The man kept glancing at Frank's laptop bag with unusual interest. At midnight, when both Frank and Scott appeared to be sleeping, Keanu got up quietly to use the bathroom. As he passed Scott's bed, he noticed the man's eyes were open, watching him. Keanu nodded and continued to the bathroom. Through the thin door, he could hear Scott get up and move around the room. When Keanu came out, Scott was back in bed, pretending to sleep. Frank's laptop bag had been moved slightly. In their room, Clint Eastwood couldn't sleep. Judge Johnson had taken a sleeping pill and was snoring softly in her bed across the room. Clint got up and looked out the window at the storm still raging outside. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You're in danger. The woman you're with has said too much. Room might be bugged. Be careful." Clint stared at the message, wondering if it was a prank. He looked around the room, suddenly suspicious of everything. The alarm clock, the TV, the air vent. Who would bug their room, and why? At 2 a.m., Keanu was still awake. The walls of the hotel were thin, and he could hear Scott talking again on his phone in the bathroom, his voice just a murmur. Keanu strained to listen. Target confirmed. "Yes, the package is in the accountant's possession." "No, he doesn't seem to know what he has." "The judge is also here, sharing a room with Eastwood." "Yes, they're talking freely. I'll intercept when the opportunity presents itself." Keanu's heart began to race. Whatever was happening, it involved Frank and Judge Johnson, and it sounded dangerous. Scott wasn't a pharmaceutical sales rep, but who was he? Law enforcement, or something worse? As dawn approached, the storm finally began to ease. The airline sent messages to all passengers that they would attempt to resume flights to New York by noon. Keanu knew he had to act fast. Someone on their flight was in danger, and he might be the only one who suspected it. What had started as a simple act of kindness, giving up his seat to Clint Eastwood, had somehow placed him in the middle of something far bigger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. And the worst was yet to come. Morning light filtered through the thin hotel curtains as Keanu opened his eyes. He had barely slept, his mind racing with what he had overheard Scott saying on the phone. Frank was still asleep in his bed, snoring softly. Scott's bed was empty, neatly made as if no one had slept in it. Keanu got up quietly, not wanting to wake Frank. He needed to find Clint Eastwood and tell him what he had heard. Maybe the older actor would know what to do. As Keanu pulled on his jeans and a fresh t-shirt, Frank stirred and opened his eyes. "What time is it?" Frank mumbled, reaching for his glasses on the nightstand. "Just after 7. Keanu replied. "Have you seen Scott this morning?" Frank shook his head. "No, but I slept like a rock. Is he gone?" "Looks that way. Listen, Frank, I need to ask you something important. Is there anything unusual in your laptop? Anything someone might want to steal?" Frank sat up, suddenly alert. "What? No, of course not. Just boring accounting files, client information." He paused, thinking. "Well, there are the financial records for the retail chain I'm meeting with. They're worth millions, but who would care about that besides me and my clients?" Keanu wasn't sure what to think. Maybe he had misinterpreted what he heard. Maybe Scott really was just a pharmaceutical rep making normal business calls. "Why do you ask?" Frank said, looking worried. "Just being cautious," Keanu replied. "I'm going to get some breakfast. Want to join me?" "I need to shower first," Frank said. "I'll meet you down there." Keanu nodded and left the room. In the hallway, he nearly bumped into a woman coming out of the ice machine room. He recognized her as one of the first-class passengers from the flight. She had short blonde hair and wore dark sunglasses despite being indoors. She stared at him for a moment, then hurried away without speaking. In the hotel restaurant, Keanu spotted Clint Eastwood sitting alone at a corner table. The older actor looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Keanu approached him. "Mind if I join you?" Keanu asked. Clint gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Be my guest. Couldn't sleep either?" "Not much," Keanu admitted. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Something strange is happening. The man sharing my room was making suspicious phone calls last night. He mentioned a judge and something about a package that my other roommate has without knowing it." Clint's expression darkened. He slid his phone across the table, showing Keanu the strange text message he had received during the night. "I got this around midnight," Clint said. "Thought it might be a prank, but now I'm not so sure." "Where's the judge now?" Keanu asked. "Still, sleeping. Those pills knocked her out good." Clint sipped his coffee. She told me about her case last night. High-profile drug trafficking trial. She's worried about getting back to New York in time. Before they could discuss it further, a hotel employee approached their table. "Mr. Reeves, there's an urgent call for you at the front desk." Keanu frowned. No one knew he was staying at this hotel except the other passengers from the flight. He excused himself and followed the employee to the front desk. There was no call. Instead, Scott Weber was waiting for him in the lobby, now dressed in a crisp suit with a badge clipped to his belt. "FBI," Scott said quietly, flashing his credentials. "I need to speak with you privately." Keanu followed Scott to a quiet corner of the lobby. "I know you overheard my conversation last night," Scott said. "I couldn't tell you then, but I'm working undercover. We have reason to believe someone on your flight is carrying sensitive information that could compromise a federal witness protection case." "Frank?" Keanu asked. "The accountant?" Scott nodded. "We think someone may have planted files on his laptop without his knowledge. But there's someone else working against us. A woman named Carol Sanders. She was in first class on your flight near your original seat. We believe she's working for the Martinez crime family." "The blonde woman with sunglasses?" Keanu asked, remembering the woman he had seen in the hallway. Scott's expression changed. "You've seen her this morning?" "Where?" "Near the ice machine, on my floor, about 10 minutes ago." Scott spoke rapidly into his wrist microphone, calling for backup. "We need to get to Frank now. She might already be moving on him." Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood had returned to his room to check on Judge Johnson. She was awake and on the phone, looking worried. "What do you mean there's been a security breach?" she was saying. "How could they possibly know where Sanchez is being held?" When she saw Clint enter, she quickly ended her call. "Problems?" Clint asked. "Nothing I can discuss," she replied, but her hands were shaking as she gathered her things. "We need to get back to New York as soon as possible." In his room, Frank Collins was just stepping out of the shower when there was a knock at the door. Assuming it was Keanu returning, he wrapped a towel around his waist and opened the door. The Lecha, blonde woman with sunglasses, stood there pointing a small gun at him. "Get dressed," she said coldly. "Bring your laptop. We're going for a walk." Frank backed away, terrified. "Who are you? What do you want?" "You're carrying something that doesn't belong to you," she said, "and I'm here to take it back." Frank scrambled to pull on his clothes while the woman watched him. His hands shook so badly he could hardly button his shirt. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I'm just an accountant." "The files, Collins, the ones embedded in your presentation slides. Did you really think the Martinez family wouldn't notice when their financial records were copied?" Frank's face went pale. "The retail chain. They're a front for money laundering." The woman smiled without warmth. "Smart boy. Now move." As they stepped into the hallway, they came face to face with Keanu and Scott, who had just arrived at the room. Scott immediately drew his gun. "FBI, freeze!" The woman reacted instantly, pulling Frank in front of her as a shield and pressing her gun to his head. "Back off or the accountant dies right here." Scott kept his gun trained on them. "It's over, Carol. The building is surrounded." She laughed. "You're bluffing. Your backup is still 15 minutes out." "I checked." Keanu, standing slightly behind Scott, caught Frank's terrified gaze. He gave a slight nod, trying to communicate a plan. Frank seemed to understand. "You won't make it out of here," Scott said to Carol. "Let him go." "I don't think so," she replied. "We're walking out the front door and no one is going to stop us." As they began moving toward the elevator, Frank suddenly went limp, dropping to the floor as if fainting. The sudden movement caught Carol off guard. In that split second, Keanu lunged forward, tackling her to the ground. The gun went off, the bullet hitting the ceiling. Scott quickly helped Keanu subdue Carol, handcuffing her as she struggled and cursed. "Nice move," Scott said to Keanu. "You'd make a decent agent." "Just something I learned in a movie," Keanu replied with a small smile. Frank sat on the floor, shaking with relief and fear. "She said the company I've been working with is laundering money for a crime family. I had no idea." Scott helped Frank to his feet. Those files you have contain evidence we've been trying to get for months. Your regular client files somehow got mixed with financial records that prove the connection between the retail chain and the Martinez family. The same family that Judge Johnson's witness is testifying against, Keanu added, remembering what Clint had told him. Scott looked surprised. How do you know about that? Before Keanu could answer, the elevator doors opened and Judge Johnson stepped out, followed by Clint Eastwood and two uniformed police officers. There's been a mistake, Judge Johnson announced, looking directly at Scott. This man is not FBI. His credentials are fake. Scott's face hardened. He reached for his gun, but one of the officers already had his weapon drawn. Don't move, the officer ordered. Keanu looked from Scott to Judge Johnson in confusion. I don't understand. Who is he? His real name is Eric Doyle, Judge Johnson explained. He works for the Martinez family. He's been trying to find out where our witness is being held. The real FBI agents arrived minutes later, taking both Carol and Scott, or rather Eric, into custody. As they were led away, Carol glared at Keanu. This isn't over, she said. You have no idea what you've started by giving up that seat. Keanu watched them go, wondering how a simple act of kindness had led to this moment. And he couldn't shake the feeling that Carol was right. This wasn't over yet. The airport buzzed with activity as passengers from the delayed flight prepared to board. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind clear blue skies. Keanu sat in the waiting area, watching FBI agents move through the crowd. After the morning's events, real FBI agents had arrived to secure Frank's laptop and take statements from everyone involved. Frank sat beside Keanu, looking pale and shaken. I still can't believe it, he said. All this time I was working for criminals without knowing it. You couldn't have known, Keanu reassured him. My meeting in New York? It was all a setup, Frank continued. They probably planned to kill me once they got the files back. A tall man in a dark suit approached them. He had introduced himself earlier as Agent Daniel Wood, the lead FBI agent assigned to the case. Mr. Collins, we've finished copying the files from your laptop, Agent Wood said, handing the computer back to Frank. You've unknowingly helped us break open one of the biggest money laundering operations we've been tracking for years. What happens now? Frank asked. We'll need you to testify about your interactions with the company, Agent Wood explained. You'll be placed in witness protection, at least temporarily. Frank looked down at his hands. What about my employees, my company? We'll make arrangements, Agent Wood promised. Your employees will be taken care of while you're away. Across the terminal, Clint Eastwood was speaking with Judge Johnson. After the revelation that Scott Weber was actually Eric Doyle, a member of the Martinez crime family, the judge had been placed under additional security. I can't believe I talk so openly about the case, Judge Johnson said, shaking her head. I could have compromised everything. You had no way of knowing, Clint said. I should have been more careful, she insisted. This isn't a movie, Mr. Eastwood. Real lives are at stake. A security officer approached them. Judge Johnson, your secure transport is ready. We need to get you to New York immediately. The judge stood and gathered her things. Thank you for your company, Mr. Eastwood, and please thank Mr. Reeves for me. His actions this morning likely saved multiple lives. After she left, Clint made his way over to where Keanu was sitting with Frank. Quite an adventure we're having, he said as he sat down beside them. Not the kind I'd choose, Keanu replied with a small smile. The judge has been taken to a secure transport, Clint told them. She asked me to thank you. Agent Wood returned, now accompanied by a woman in a business suit. Mr. Reeves, Mr. Eastwood, this is Agent Lisa Monroe. She'll be traveling with you to New York to ensure your safety. Is that necessary? Keanu asked. I thought the threat was contained. Agent Wood's expression was serious. Eric Doyle and Carol Sanders were working for the Martinez family, but they weren't acting alone. We have reason to believe there may be others on your flight. Until we know for certain, we want to take precautions. The announcement came for their flight to begin boarding. As they stood to get in line, Keanu noticed a man watching them from near a gift shop. When their eyes met, the man quickly looked away and walked off. Did you see that man? Keanu asked Agent Monroe. She nodded. We're aware of him. He's under surveillance. The passengers boarded the plane in groups. Due to the unusual circumstances, the airline had rearranged seating. Keanu found himself in first class again, sitting next to Clint Eastwood. Frank was seated across the aisle with Agent Monroe beside him. Other FBI agents were scattered throughout the plane, disguised as regular passengers. As the plane took off, Keanu felt a strange mix of relief and tension. The immediate danger seemed to be over, but Carol's parting words still echoed in his mind. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started by giving up that seat." "Penny for your thoughts," Clint said, interrupting Keanu's reflection. "Just thinking about how something so simple can lead to something so complicated," Keanu replied. "All I did was offer you my seat." Clint nodded. "The smallest actions often have the biggest consequences. I've lived long enough to see that play out many times." Halfway through the flight, Keanu got up to use the bathroom. As he walked down the aisle, he noticed the man from the terminal sitting in the back row. The man was watching him intently. Keanu continued to the bathroom, trying to appear casual. Inside the small bathroom, Keanu splashed water on his face. When he opened the door to leave, a flight attendant he hadn't seen before was standing there. Before Keanu could react, the man pressed something hard against his side. "Don't make a sound," the fake attendant whispered. "Move toward the back of the plane." Keanu felt the unmistakable shape of a gun pressed against him. How had the man gotten a weapon past security? He moved as directed, his mind racing to find a way out of this situation. As they approached the back of the plane, Agent Monroe noticed something was wrong. She stood up, her hand moving toward her concealed weapon. The man from the terminal also stood, blocking her path to Keanu. "Sit down," the fake attendant called out to Agent Monroe, "or I'll shoot him right here." The other passengers, unaware of what was happening, looked up in confusion. Agent Monroe slowly raised her hands and sat back down. The fake attendant pushed Keanu into the back galley of the plane, out of sight from most passengers. "The Martinez family sends their regards," the man hissed. "You've caused us a lot of trouble, Mr. Reeves." "What do you want?" Keanu asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Insurance," the man replied. "You're going to help us make a call to our associates on the ground. You're going to tell them exactly what I say, or this plane will have an unfortunate accident." Keanu realized with horror that there must be more people involved, perhaps even among the flight crew. The situation was far more dangerous than any of them had realized. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood had noticed Keanu's prolonged absence. He caught Frank's worried look across the aisle. Something was wrong. Clint carefully unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. "Sir, please remain seated," a flight attendant said to him. Clint gave her his famous squint. "Need to stretch my legs. Doctor's orders." He moved into the aisle before she could protest further. At the back of the plane, the fake attendant was forcing Keanu to dial a number on a satellite phone. "Tell them the package is secure, but the delivery has been compromised. New drop point needed." Clint moved slowly down the aisle, using his age as cover for his deliberate pace. When he reached Agent Monroe, he pretended to stumble, falling against her seat. "Back galley," she whispered as she helped him up. "Armed hostile." Clint nodded, almost imperceptibly, and continued toward the back of the plane. He could see Keanu standing in the galley with someone behind him, just out of sight. "Keanu, my boy," Clint called out loudly as he approached. "You've been gone so long I thought you might have fallen in." The fake attendant tensed, not expecting this interruption. In that moment of distraction, Keanu made his move. He jabbed his elbow hard into the man's stomach and twisted away from the gun. The weapon fired, the sound muffled by a silencer but still audible in the confined space. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as the cabin pressure changed. The bullet had hit something vital in the plane's systems. The captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a sudden loss of cabin pressure. Please put on your oxygen masks and stay in your seats." Chaos erupted as passengers scrambled to secure their masks. In the confusion, the fake attendant lunged at Keanu again. This time, Clint was ready. Despite his age, the legendary actor moved with surprising speed, striking the man with a well-placed blow that sent him staggering back. Agent Monroe and other FBI agents rushed to the back of the plane, weapons drawn. They quickly subdued the fake attendant and secured his weapon. "Are you all right?" Agent Monroe asked Keanu. Keanu nodded, catching his breath. He said there are others, maybe even among the crew. Agent Monroe spoke rapidly into her radio, alerting her team. The plane began a rapid descent as the pilots prepared for an emergency landing. Clint put his hand on Keanu's shoulder. "Not bad. For a couple of actors, huh?" Keanu managed a small smile despite the tension. "I think I prefer doing stunts with a film crew and safety wires." As the plane descended toward an unscheduled landing in Pittsburgh, Keanu couldn't help but wonder how many more people were involved in this conspiracy, and how much further the consequences of his simple act of kindness would reach before this was truly over. The emergency landing in Pittsburgh went smoothly despite the damage to the plane. As passengers filed into the terminal, FBI agents quickly separated Keanu, Clint, and Frank from the others. They were taken to a secure room in the airport where Agent Wood was waiting for them. "The situation has escalated," Agent Wood explained, his face grim. "We've uncovered a larger plot than we initially thought. The Martinez family has connections throughout the East Coast, including inside law enforcement." "Who can we trust?" Keanu asked, still shaken from the encounter on the plane. "Right now, just the people in this room," Agent Wood replied. "We've established that at least 2 more members of the Martinez organization were on your flight, and we're interrogating the fake flight attendant now." Frank sat in a corner, his head in his hands. "All this because I accidentally downloaded some files. I just wanted to save my company." "It's not your fault," Clint said, patting Frank's shoulder. "You were in the wrong place at the wrong time." Agent Monroe entered the room, closing the door behind her. "We have a problem. Judge Johnson's secure transport was attacked 20 minutes ago. She's missing." The room fell silent as they absorbed this news. Agent Wood's phone rang and he stepped aside to take the call. When he returned, his expression was even more serious. "That was my superior," he said. "We believe there's a mole in our operation. Someone is feeding information to the Martinez family about our movements." "What about Victor Sanchez?" Agent Monroe asked. "The witness?" "He's been moved to a new safe house," Agent Wood assured her. "But we need to get there before the Martinez family does. His testimony is the key to bringing down their entire operation." "And you need us because," Clint asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because right now you're the only ones we know aren't working for them," Agent Wood replied. "We need to move Sanchez again, and we need your help to create a diversion." Keanu and Clint exchanged looks. "What kind of diversion?" Keanu asked. Agent Wood laid out a plan. They would fly to New York on a private FBI plane, making it appear that Frank was with them to give his testimony. Meanwhile, the real Frank would be taken to a different location. The hope was that the Martinez family would focus on stopping what they believed was Frank and his evidence, giving the FBI time to move Victor Sanchez to the courthouse for his testimony. "You want us to be decoys," Clint said, understanding, immediately. "It's dangerous," Agent Wood admitted. "But we'll have our best agents with you." "What about Judge Johnson?" Keanu asked. "We're doing everything we can to find her," Agent Monroe said. "But our priority has to be protecting Sanchez and getting his testimony." 2 hours later, Keanu and Clint boarded a small private jet with Agent Monroe and 3 other FBI agents. Another man, dressed like Frank and with similar build, went with them as a stand-in. The real Frank had been taken to a secure location under heavy guard. As their plane took off, Keanu looked out the window at the darkening sky. "When I offered you my seat on that first flight, I never imagined it would lead to this." Clint nodded. "Life has a way of surprising you. Even at my age, I'm still learning that lesson." Agent Monroe sat across from them, checking her weapon. "We'll land at a private airfield outside New York. From there, we'll take 2 separate vehicles to the courthouse. Our intel suggests the Martinez family will try to intercept us on the way." "And you want them to intercept us?" Keanu said, understanding the plan. "While the real Sanchez is taken in by another route." "Exactly," Agent Monroe confirmed. We need to keep them busy long enough for Sanchez to give his testimony. The flight to New York was tense but uneventful. As they began their descent, Agent A. Monroe received a message on her secure phone. Her expression changed as she read it. "What is it?" Keanu asked. "They found Judge Johnson," she said quietly. "She's alive but injured, and she gave us some information. The mole in the FBI is Agent Wood." The news hit like a thunderbolt. "Wood?" one of the other agents exclaimed. "But he's leading the operation." "Which gave him perfect cover," Agent Monroe said. "He's been working for the Martinez family for years, according to the judge. He's the one who leaked her transport route." "So this whole plan," Keanu began. "Could be a trap," Clint finished for him. Agent Monroe was already on, her radio alerting her superiors. "We need to change the plan. Now." The plane landed at the private airfield where two black SUVs were waiting. Agent Monroe quickly briefed the other agents about Wood's betrayal. They decided to change their route to the courthouse, hoping to stay one step ahead of any ambush that might be waiting. Keanu and Clint got into the first SUV with Agent Monroe and one other agent. The Frank lookalike went in the second vehicle with the remaining agents. "We'll split up," Agent Monroe said. "Take different routes to the courthouse. If Wood is the mole, he'll have told the Martinez family about our original plan." The SUVs drove off in different directions. The night was dark with no moon visible through the clouds. Keanu's vehicle took back roads through industrial areas, avoiding the main highways. "Something doesn't feel right," Clint said after they had been driving for 20 minutes. "If Wood is the mole, why send us on this mission at all? Why not just tell the Martinez family where Sanchez is being held?" Agent Monroe considered this. "Maybe he doesn't know. The location of the safe house is compartmentalized. Only a few agents know where Sanchez is. Or maybe," the driver said, suddenly pulling a gun with his right hand while steering with his left. "Wood isn't the only mole." Agent Monroe reached for her weapon, but the driver was faster. "Don't," he warned, "or I'll crash this car and kill us all." "Davis, what are you doing?" Agent Monroe asked, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her. "Following orders," Davis replied. "The Martinez family pays better than the government." Keanu, sitting behind Davis, caught Clint's eye. The older actor gave a slight nod, then suddenly clutched his chest and gasped loudly. "My heart," Clint cried out, doubling over in apparent pain. "I need my pills." Davis glanced back in concern and confusion. In that split second, Keanu lunged forward and grabbed the driver's arm, forcing the gun away. The SUV swerved wildly as they struggled. Agent Monroe joined the fight, trying to take the gun. The vehicle veered off the road and crashed through a chain-link fence surrounding an abandoned warehouse. It came to a jolting stop against a concrete loading dock. The impact deployed the airbags, momentarily stunning everyone. Keanu recovered first, pushing his door open and stumbling out. Agent Monroe was right behind him, dragging the dazed Davis out of the driver's seat and handcuffing him to the steering wheel. Clint emerged last, moving stiffly but otherwise unharmed. "Nice acting," Keanu said to him with a small smile. "Wasn't all acting," Clint replied, rubbing his chest. "That crash didn't do my old bones any favors." Agent Monroe was on her radio, reporting their situation and Davis's betrayal. "The second SUV isn't responding," she said worriedly. "We have to assume it's been compromised too." "What now?" Keanu asked. "We're about 3 miles from the courthouse," Agent Monroe said. "We can't risk calling for another transport. We'll have to go on foot and stay out of sight." They set off through the industrial zone, keeping to shadows and side streets. Agent Monroe led the way, her weapon ready. Behind them, sirens wailed as police responded to the crash site. "You know," Clint said as they walked, "this would make a hell of a movie." Despite everything, Keanu laughed. "I think I've had enough excitement for one day." They reached the courthouse just as dawn was breaking. FBI agents surrounded the building, and news vans were parked outside. Agent Monroe identified herself to the guards, who let them in through a side entrance. Inside, they learned that Victor Sanchez had arrived safely and was already giving his testimony. The Martinez family's attempts to stop him had failed. Jugular. Johnson was in the hospital but expected to recover. Both Agent Wood and several other moles had been arrested. 3 days later, Keanu and Clint met for coffee at a small cafe in Los Angeles. The story had made national news, though many of the details remained classified. Hard to believe it all started with a seat on a plane, Clint said, stirring his coffee. Sometimes the smallest choices have the biggest impact, Keanu replied. Would you do it again? Clint asked, knowing what would happen. Keanu thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes. Despite everything, some good came from it. The Martinez family is finished. Frank's company is safe. And I got to help stop some bad people. Plus, Clint added with a wink, you gotta save Dirty, Harry's life. Not many can say that. Keanu smiled. True, but next time I offer someone my seat on a plane, I'm going to make sure there are no crime families involved first. As they talked, a young woman approached their table hesitantly. Excuse me, she said. My name is Linda Martinez. I'm Victor Sanchez's daughter. I just wanted to thank you both for what you did for my father. Keanu and Clint looked at each other in surprise, then back at the woman. My father is safe now because of you, she continued. The family that threatened us for so long is finished. We can finally live without fear. As Linda walked away, Keanu felt a sense of peace. The consequences of his simple act of kindness had been far more complex and dangerous than he could have imagined. But in the end, it had made a difference in people's lives. And sometimes that was enough.